Just to give you a little bit of background on Greer, she was raised in the Midwest and is a poet, short story writer, playwright, and novelist. Having worked on my master's degree at American University, I was excited to see that several of her plays have been performed at American University here in the area. And she's here this morning to have a little conversation with Beth Ann about her very first novel, The Magician's Lie, which was praised by Publishers Weekly as well-paced, evocative, and adventurous. And of course, the fabulous Oprah.com, everyone loves to see a few words there, described it as more bewitching than a crackling fire, which I loved. I mentioned that I discovered Miss Macallister's book at a big, basically industry event for folks in the book business in New York last year. It's exhausting, it's overcrowded, and it was such a relief to go by her publisher's booth, and it was a little quieter, and there were friendly people, and they passed me this fabulous book, and so I was very excited to see that she would be in Gaithersburg this year. So I'm definitely a big fan of the plot twist and playing a lot of guessing games until you get to the end. And I also wanted to mention Beth Ann Patrick, who is here to be in conversation with Greer this morning, this afternoon. It's still morning. And I've been here for a while. And she herself is a writer and author, writing for Lit Hub, correct, and is founder of Friday Reads. So please join me in welcoming Greer Macallister and Beth Ann Patrick.
Thank you all for being here this morning. It's great to be out at this outdoor book festival. I think now this is the last one in this area since the National Book Festival moved inside. So I'm delighted to be here with my friend Greer Macallister today to talk about The Magician's Lie. If you have not read it yet, I'm going to tell you, just plan to make it part of your book budget for today. Make sure you get a copy. It is really, really fun and bewitching as a crackling fire. I love that. Thank you, Oprah.com. Excellent. So, first things first, Greer. This is an amazing story. And I know you are going to read to us a bit from it. So I'm going to let you read. Then we can talk about the story without spoilers and how you found it. But first, I'm going to let you read a couple of pages so you can all get a feel for this lovely book.
Great. Thank you very much. And if at some point this microphone's pretty good. I usually tell people to raise their hands if they can't hear me, but I think you will almost certainly be able to hear me. And thank you all for coming out. It is a beautiful day. I hope everyone would be here too if it weren't a beautiful day. But it never hurts to have a little extra sunshine. The beginning of the book is pretty dark, so the sunshine should help. But I'm just going to read the first couple of pages of The Magician's Lie. And then Beth Ann and I will have a chat about it. So here we go. Chapter 1, Waterloo, Iowa, July 23rd, 1905, 6 o'clock in the evening. Tonight, I will do the impossible. The impossible is nothing new to me. As I do every night, I will make people believe things that aren't true. I will show them worlds that never existed, events that never happened. I will weave a web of beautiful illusion to snare them, a glittering trap that drags them willingly with me into the magical, false, spellbinding world. Before that, now, I will gather my strength. I will remain motionless, barely even breathing, here in this chair, while preparations happen around me, to me. I feel the feathery touch of brushes on my cheeks, on my chin, as my face is made up for the stage. I feel a heavy thumb pressed down on my eyelid. Another hand lightly edges it with kohl. Fingers twist and pin my hair into place, snap a heavy gilded bracelet onto my wrist. It's not possible to ignore the hands, but I focus on not reacting to them, on not reacting to anything. I go through the act inside my head, rehearsing my patter and my gestures, seeing the whole night unfold. I welcome the crowd and take charge of the theater. I produce hats from nothingness. I transport coins through the air with a snap of my fingers, turning gold into nothing, into gold again. The details of each scene bloom and dive and swarm through my head as I picture the evening from first curtain to final bow, here in the chair, silent and still. Without giving any outward sign, I dance on the inside, hearing every trilling and tender note of the music, practicing every elegant step. When it's time, I rise on command and step into the dress held out for me, bowing my head. The dress is always last. This is how we proceed every night, and at least in this way, tonight is the same as every other. The hands close up the back of the dress, waist to neck, and then turn me around to pass 3 tiny buttons through 3 tiny loops, covering my throat, and my costume is complete. On stage, I will act as I always act. I will do many impossible things. I will make mysteries of scarves and coins, enchant the audience sweetly, misdirect their attention to take them by surprise. I will entertain and flatter. Then I will close the show as I always do with the halved man. I will cut a man in 2, severing him through his trunk, and he will scream for mercy as the blood pours forth. The audience will be unable to believe what they see, but neither will they be able to reject it. It will look entirely real. Then I will heal him. He will spring up whole again, wiping away the blood from an expanse of flawless skin as if there had never been a wound. My healing powers are legendary, though no one really knows their true extent. They don't know how I wish away my own injuries, the cuts and bruises, the burns, the broken bones. It isn't part of my legend, but it's part of my life. I'm escorted to the stage, as I always am, another set of footfalls moving exactly in concert with mine. This is the routine now, every night. This is the life of the most famed female illusionist in the world, very nearly the only one in existence, the life I have made for myself through luck and talent and sheer will. This is the life I have decided to leave behind. This is the life I will end. Tonight, I will escape my torturer once and for all time. Tonight, I will kill him. There you go. Like I said, it's nice to have the bright sun.
Yeah, exactly. But there is so much in those pages. And that's one of the things that I loved about this book. There are layers and layers, just like there are layers of artifice that your magician puts on. So tell us first, because I'm sure this is something people are going to want to know, where you found this story, because it is based in truth. Yes.
A little bit.
A
Yeah,
little bit.
I can give you sort of the inspiration, which was the absence of something more than the presence of something, which is that I had seen countless references all my life to male magicians cutting women in half.
Right.
It's just a thing. There's like a potato chip commercial where a guy cuts a girl in half, and that's just what happens. I had never seen anything about a female magician cutting a man in half. And so I started to look around. I thought, well, maybe it's just me, and it's not. There really haven't been that many over time. And the first female magician to become famous for cutting a man in half was really in the 1980s. It was much, much more recent. But I dug a little deeper and did some more research and found sort of this period where magic was so part of the culture. Like people would go out and see a magic show as part of vaudeville.
Kind of like going to see a comedian or a Broadway musical or something. Yeah.
Exactly. So you'd see a magician, and there was a very famous female magician at the time named Adelaide Herman who appears in the book. So I incorporated her story. She didn't cut a man in half, and so I didn't want her to be the main character, but she sort of inspires my main character and becomes part of the story when she does a very scary and famous and real trick called the bullet catch, where they fire a gun at your face and you catch the bullet in your teeth or not. It has killed more magicians than any other illusion, because it's just not anytime there's an actual gun, things can go wrong. So and things did, but for her, so Adelaide Herman, I'll try to tell it very quickly, but she became famous because she was her husband's assistant. He was a very famous magician, Alexander Herman. She was his assistant. He died very suddenly, leaving her in a lot of debt, and the only thing she could think to do was to pick up where he left off and to take over his bookings. And the first booking that she had to take over, he had said he would do the bullet catch, even though he had never done it before. He said he would do the bullet catch in January 1897 on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City. He died in December 1897. And so his wife said, okay, I guess, either I'll make it or I won't.
Right.
And she did. And she practiced magic for decades after that
Well,
successfully.
what you just said is quite interesting with some of the questions I wanted to ask you, because as you said, Adelaide started out as her husband's assistant. And anytime you write historical fiction, you've got this whole thing going on. There's so many ways in which women were held back. You could, you could go on and on about that. And this is pushing against. That's what I really liked about The Magician's Lie. It's pushing against that a little bit because Adelaide comes into her own as a magician, and then her support of Ada also helps Ada to come into her own. So let's talk a little bit about that, about women supporting other women and women doing things in this era that previously only men had been allowed to do, particularly in the realm of the magicians and prestidigitateurs.
Right. Ooh, that was very well done. Yeah, I mean, it was very unusual. I wanted to set it at a time sort of where it would be unusual but not impossible to have this woman doing the magic that she was doing, because I wanted her to be very controversial. I wanted her to be making headlines.
Right.
And certainly at this time, before women could vote, women were still very much not
That's
encouraged.
a really good point. We forget about that sometimes in these stories, yeah.
So very much not considered equals and not encouraged to sort of forge their own destinies. So you see, we'll probably refer to her interchangeably as Ada and Arden, because the main character has both of those names at different times in her life. But she... she has some experiences early on where she's taught that nobody's going to take care of her but her, and she has to do that as a woman making her way in this particular world. So she is very unusual in that she's really claiming her place and pushing it and saying, okay, it's my career, it's my life. I'm going to get out there and do this. And she fully accepts. She knows that she's going to be controversial. She fully accepts it. And continues to do this type of magic even after it proves fairly unpopular.
Well, that I try to keep all interviews spoiler free, but we have to talk about the fact that Ada Arden faces some real hurdles, and it's a much darker question. Back to the dark on the sunny day. One of the characters is, without question, a monster, if that's the right word. And it's a really interesting contrast. So I wanted to ask you about what it was like to develop and write a character like that, especially, and this is what is really cool, it's not a one-dimensional character.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting when you talk with other authors about sort of process, and when you talk with readers about process, people will often say, well, I had to get inside the head of this character to write them.
Right.
And I did not enjoy spending any time in this person's head. I spent time in his head because I had to figure it out. Because like you said, you can't have it just be one-dimensional, and you can't just have a villain being wah-ha-ha, and that's it. So I really tried to add some texture and psychology and sort of flesh out why this person does what they do. But I certainly didn't enjoy it, being stuck in there. But I felt like the story needed somebody who's really in Arden's way, because if you haven't read it, the structure is basically, she starts out, performs this illusion. It's like a page 3 spoiler, so I'm going to go ahead and give it away.
Okay. That's okay.
A dead body is found immediately after her show, and she is assumed to be guilty of the murder, because a man is found partly cut in half under the stage. So they assume that the person who runs around cutting men in half all the time is probably the one who did it. So she gets caught and held by a young policeman from a neighboring town, very, very small town. Happens to be the town I grew up in. But he is opposed to her. She wants him to let her go, and he doesn't want to let her go because he could get famous by being the person to capture her. So they're in opposition the whole time, but he's not a bad guy.
Right.
Virgil is a pretty decent guy who just happens to have exactly the opposite goal that Arden has.
There's a lot of tension, but he's not a bad guy. And one of the things I definitely want to make sure we have time to talk about is the title. Because there are layers to this. One of the layers is the lie that every magician tells with every trick. one of those is the lie that Ada may or may not be telling. There are other layers to it as well. So was that something that, was that your title? Did you find it really quickly?
No. I have, thank you. I have some friends who have their book like the first title and had the cover design and everything else, and I am not one of those people. So yeah, it had a different title, and I was talking with my editor about it when we did a panel together, and realized neither of us actually remembered what title it had when they bought it.
That happens.
It's been called a lot of things. It was The Female Illusionist. It was The Amazing Arden and the Halved Man. But my publisher and agent and I really just got in a room and brainstormed, and we all loved The Magician's Lie because it raises that question. Like, you're trying to figure out as you're going along, what is the lie? Is the whole story the lie? Is there just one thing?
And who's lying, and which magician?
That's true. There are multiple magicians.
The other thing I loved about it is because Greer read those first 2 pages, it's all about the artifice for Ada in what she's putting on. The dress comes last. First the face is painted, and then the cuff is on. And I thought, this is such an interesting observation about the way women had to be at this time too.
Yes.
And that makes me think of the cover with that beautiful satin on it. It's just so I'm sorry we both only have
advanced copies that don't have the final.
Yeah, exactly. So I know we probably don't have too much more time, but I also know that you, as was said in the introduction, have written plays and short stories and other kinds of fiction. And I'm wondering where you plan to go from here. Are you going to write another historical novel?
When I have time, I absolutely am. People
there
ask
are small children involved.
People ask how the second book is going, and I say, well, my 9-month-old just got teeth, and my 3-year-old is a 3-year-old. But I am working on another historical novel because I like you said, I've written in a lot of different genres, but it feels like, and I really kind of accidentally wrote historical fiction because I wanted this to be set at this time. I had never written anything historical before, but it would have been a different story set in Vegas if she had with a TV special, as opposed to it's 1905 and she's a touring magician and can make headlines by doing what she does. So so I had to write it back then, but I had never written anything historical before. But since then, every idea that's come into my head is a historical idea.
Oh,
so
really?
I think I'm taking a real right turn here.
Anything you can tell us about the next book?
I can tell you a little bit about it.
Please.
I have decided. It's set just a little bit earlier in the 1850s, 1860s in Chicago. And it's based much more, this one, you have Adelaide's story, but Arden is a fictional character. This one is based much more on a real historical character who's very pioneering, very, very interesting woman. So I hope to be able to share more about that soon.
I want to make sure that we have time. If there, how much more time do we have? Anyone? Do we have time for audience questions? Excellent. If there aren't any questions, I'll keep going, but I want to make sure I leave time for you all. So, right here.
Are you familiar with any of the other circus books that have been published? Night Circus
Yeah, Water for Elephants, Night Circus. I read Water for Elephants way back when it came out. And I started writing this actually before Night Circus came out. But I do try to read other things that sound like they might be similar. So
there was also another one, Mrs. Peregrine's Peculiar Children.
oh yeah, I haven't read that one. I've heard it's really good.
It is a very good book. Excellent. And that's interesting too, because we are fascinated by the circus, aren't we? It is another world that gets created right in the middle. Like, I don't know about here in Gaithersburg, but I lived across a highway when I was growing up in southern New York State from a big field, and every year when Ringling Brothers came through, or whatever the circus was, they would set up right there, and we could go across and watch the elephants being fed. And I remember that sense of awe, and that's part of one of my questions. Yeah, that's right. One of my questions that I didn't ask was talking about how we all want to believe. And I think that's what you're saying with the circus books. That's everybody wants to believe in something different here.
And I love to tell people that people ask if I learned to do magic for this book, and I tried, but I'm really bad at it. But I made this out of nothing. So that's my magic. But it's very similar because people want to believe, but they're also, you accept being fooled. You pick up a novel, you know it's not real, but you accept it, and if I do my job right, you believe in those characters and you want to know what's going on and what happens to them. And it's the same thing with stage magic. You walk in knowing that you're not actually seeing a man getting cut in half. You're not actually seeing a woman turn into a tiger.
Unless he is actually cut in half.
Unless he is, which you will have to read the book to find out.
Exactly. Other questions? What other books, we were just talking about the circus books, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about is other historical books that you love and read, and especially recent things that, first you have to read The Magician's Lie, then you can read the other books that we mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I just finished reading The Baker's Daughter by Sarah McCoy, which is amazing. She has a new one out.
The Mapmaker's Children.
Mapmaker's Children. She's here later today. Actually, Sarah and the other one I was going to mention, Erica Roebuck, are on a panel together at 3 something. So Sarah McCoy, Erica Roebuck are here. So I read Erica's book, Fallen Beauty, about Edna St. Vincent Millay.
Right. And her new one is The House of Hawthorne about Sophia or Sophia. It's funny, she said to me when we talked at Annapolis that everyone in New England says Sophia, but she just thinks Sophia is so much prettier. So that's another good one that's out now.
Yeah, those are both great. And I just picked up, but I haven't started to read, I guess it's older, Andrea Barrett's The Voyage of the Narwhal. So, but I have, since I started writing historical fiction, I'm mainly reading historical fiction. It's really changed my reading habits, too.
Oh, that's quite interesting, especially after being a playwright. Did you find yourself bringing elements of that? I'll call it both a genre and a talent, does that come into your writing as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had people who didn't know that I had any background in playwriting refer to the scenes. It alternates between the scenes in the police station where the policeman is interrogating Arden, and then it's her story that she's telling to him. But the scenes in the police station, somebody said, well, it's like a 2-person play. Because it's a one room. She's handcuffed to a chair with 5 pairs of handcuffs. He's standing there next to her, and it's just like they're on a stage. So all they have is their dialogue. That's all they can do. I feel like play is just like, you think of costumes, you think of what someone's wearing tells the audience who they are.
But that dialogue is everything.
And dialogue is absolutely everything.
Absolutely everything. And that back and forth, it's a really wonderful repartee between them because they're trying to outsmart each other. Yes. And that made me think a lot of it was sort of a 19th century Adam's rib kind of thing between Virgil and Ada, which is even though it's more somber and difficult because he is interrogating her, they are finding that they're worthy opponents.
Yes.
It's not the love story either. Is that a spoiler?
No,
I don't think so.
There's a love story which is not those two people.
Exactly. So that's that's another dark question. But in writing historical fiction, another thing that you talk about in the interview in the back of the book, but in other interviews as well, is the love of research that you've discovered. So spend a couple of minutes on that and tell us about some of the surprising things that you found while researching this book.
Well, it's been a few years now because it's over the course of 5 years, and I really got bogged down in the research and spent a lot of time what hat would she needs to take off her hat. What hat is she wearing? When
that's
we're
both fun and frustrating.
Yes, and that's exactly because I would have 2 hours to write and I would spend it all finding out about hats, and then I would not have anything written on the page. But one of the earliest things I found was I went to the internet and said, well, how long have there been sequins? Because I want her to have a sequined dress, and sequins are apparently invented by the ancient Egyptians. So there have been sequins for a very long time. So I felt free to put sequins, in the book and have her wear all sorts of shiny and beaded things. So
I know we only have about a minute left. One last question? And what time are you signing?
That's
right
a
after
that
this?
is a good question. But I think it is immediately
It
afterward.
is.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you all to go and get a signed copy of The Magician's Lie. And Greer Macallister, thank you so much for
Thank you,
talking with me
Dan.
today. This is great.
Yes,
really
these are
appreciate
so much
it.
fun. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
for being
everybody.
here.